Do any of us really believe that Donald Trump is like reading his nuclear secrets on his bedside at night? You know, there's an intent question here. And if you're going to use the Espionage Act, and if you're going to pursue this criminal investigation, you have to prove intent.
Show us what you found, because the affidavit's going to have them tell publicly now what they told the court they were going to go find. Show us what you found. It certainly won't affect the investigation. We deal with classified documents and information all the time.
A growing number of congressional Republicans are calling on the FBI to release the affidavit behind its search of former president's Mar-a-Lago home. The Justice Department has so far fought efforts to do so due to the pertinent information included in that document related to ongoing criminal investigations. The judge overseeing the case appears inclined to agree with the federal government, though Judge Bruce Reinhart last week ordered the department to prepare a redacted version of the affidavit in a new written order. He suggested that he may not actually unseal much, if any of it, to the public. I should note that NBC News is one of the media organizations that has formally asked for the affidavit to be released. And joining me now to discuss, Molly Jong-Fast, a contributing writer for The Atlantic, also Susan Del Percio, both my friends, by the way, a GOP strategist and MSNBC political analyst. So, Susan, I'll start with you. Why the heck are Republicans still asking for the affidavit? Nothing that has come out so far has been good for them. They haven't answered the question, which I think is the most important one, which is, why did the president have the stuff? So why are they still asking for the affidavit when they haven't answered the most basic questions?
I can't understand half the things the Republican Party, and especially the people you had, have been doing for the last 5 years. So you got me there. No, but seriously, this is what's so important is, you know, what Congressman said, do you really believe that Donald Trump is reading this stuff by his bedside? No, I don't believe the guy reads. Do I honestly believe that Donald Trump took this stuff to potentially make money off of it? Absolutely, I think that's a possibility, although there has been no proof of such thing, I should say it. But that, to me, is a much easier thing to believe than him actually reading the documents. This is also another important thing. They're asking for things that do not normally happen when you have people who are testifying or offering up information that they need to protect. And maybe because of the January 6th Select Committee, the way evidence is being presented ahead of time before any potential indictment, this is a little more, there seems a pushback from Republicans saying, yeah, we want ours too.
Well, I get that. Okay. But Molly, one of the things that I'm really confused about, I've been thinking about this a lot today. What does it say about the Republican Party that they're not concerned that the former president took this information? The fact that Susan can even ask that question or even consider that thought, would the president sell the nuclear secrets to someone? No, we can't dismiss that. The fact that we can't dismiss that, isn't that sign of a problem? Why is he the front runner for the Republican nomination, given that context?
I mean, the whole thing is crazy. Republicans have decided the Republicans who don't want everything they can find released because they want to sort of try to prove their guys okay. The other Republicans, the really wild ones, want to defund the FBI because they feel the FBI has gone after their man. And I mean, it is so wild. This is like, think about the Republican Party, the history of the Republican Party, and think now we have a Republican Party that wants to defund the FBI. I mean, it is wild stuff. I would say that I think they just want to muddy the waters. They want to protect their guy. They'll do anything they can. Remember, Trump has so much power in the Republican Party in the primary world with the base. They want to look good for that. But the problem, what they don't realize is that they're doing this and they're not doing anything else. So the modern Republican Party has become all about Trump, defending Trump, protecting Trump. And I don't think that's a winning midterm message for most Americans.
I mean, it's a good point. And I think that perhaps, Susan, the committee hearings have had an impact. I mean, we didn't know what they would be going in, but now we do have some polling. NBC News found that nearly 60% of voters say investigations into Donald Trump should continue, including 61% of independents and 21% of Republicans. So in your view, do you think Republicans are perhaps underestimating how much voters actually do care about this, that they do care about Donald Trump taking classified top secret SCI documents to his basement in Florida?
Well, I it's clear that Americans do care, and this is becoming an important issue. To Molly's point, she's absolutely right. The more Republicans can muddy up the water, the more confusion they can put out there. That's great. And then add to that their fear, Republicans' fear of Donald Trump. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of him coming after them. And, you know, these Republicans would be wise to remember that whatever usually is good for Donald Trump sucks for everybody else. And so to the point of it not being a great message to go into the 2022 midterm elections, Molly's exactly right. This is not what the Republicans should be talking about because it will hurt them. Or maybe it should. I should just say that would be good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe it should. I mean, one of the things to that point, Molly, that I think a lot about is the fact that we talk about Donald Trump's base a lot, and clearly there isn't anything he can do to make them not like him. So I think his base of voters, not the politicians, but the base of voters, they're not afraid of him. They like what he's saying. They're not like afraid and staying with him because out of fear. I think the more moderate Republicans, to Susan's point, perhaps are. But are we focused too much on the Republican base and not enough about the other part of the country, like all the voters in 2020 that came outside and were like, we don't want this? I mean, they've already proved themselves to be extremists, and the majority of America has rejected them.
Yeah. No, I mean, and they can't win a general. That's what we saw in 2020. They couldn't deliver for Trump. They were all jazzed up. But, you know, the people, the sort of more, I want to say, normal Republican voters don't like treason. They don't like classified documents in Mar-a-Lago. They don't like any of that stuff. And Republicans aren't going to get those voters until they stop defending Trump and trying to defund the FBI. And I don't think they're particularly, you know, you have this sort of sweet spot for Democrats where the base of the Republican Party is ruling the Republican Party, and they're setting the agenda, and the agenda is Donald Trump. And honestly, I'm a Democrat, so good for them. Like, keep going. You know, I mean, the problem is what's scary is the violence, right? What's really bad and scary is that a lot of these politicians are really willing to risk all of it, including people's lives, in order to win. And that is what's really scary, and that's what's taking the country apart. But I think for the party, it's quite bad.
Imagine saying you're opposed to political violence, you're pro-democracy, you're pro-free and fair elections. Imagine that being a controversial statement. But that's where we are in this particular moment. And we have one party working against our democratic system. I would like to still participate in that, please. Molly Jong-Fast and Susan Del Percio, I greatly appreciate you being here today. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.